Okay, we're back, and we're going to start looking at putting in some final gather, because at the moment we're getting light on these little faces of the cubes, but on nothing else. Even the metal on the outsides, there's nothing, and you can't see the ground at all. So that's less than optimal. So we're going to come across and put on final gather. Now what final gather does is, instead of having the light calculate in a straight line and then just finish, it's going to travel in a straight line and then bounce off and create secondary lighting within the scene. So therefore, after the light has bounced off these little screens, the little coloured screens that we've got, it will then reflect onto the ground and you'll get these nice spills of different colours. So we're going to turn final gather on, and we're going to put the secondary bounces up to 1. At this stage we don't want to go too high, and the accuracy down to 25. These sorts of things we can crank up later on once we get to the final render, but at the moment, while we're just testing things, we want it to be as efficient as possible. So we're going to go ahead and render that. Okay, so we're done, and you can see here that we're getting this nice spill of colour out onto the ground and onto these pieces of metal here, which is just making it look that much nicer. Now we're still getting a lot of black areas, which I think the best way to fix that up is to put an actual light into the scene. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to close these and zoom out and go to Create, Lights, and this time we're going to create a point light. Now at the moment it's hidden under all the boxes, but we'll just drag it out, and it's really tiny. No, it's not really tiny, it's because I have all the lights turned off. And so just go back to Show and click on the lights again to tick the box and you'll see them. Okay, so I have my light. I want to go in and add shadows to it. So I'll turn that on, and light radius, put that up to 3. The light radius for these lights is just going to affect the amount of feather that you get on the edge of the shadows. So the smaller the radius, the crisper the shadows will be. And the light rays, we'll put that up to 6 for now because we're already churning through quite a bit of render time. Okay, so I'm just going to put that at a nice sort of 3/4 angle. And if we line up the camera again, and just do another test render. Okay, great. So looking at that now, we can actually see everything. It's probably a little bit too bright for what I want to go for, seeing as we're getting a lot of burnt out color here. So I'll just go back quickly and dial that down to 0.6. But now we can at least see the scene. The only problem now that we're getting is a lot of this speckledy action here, but that can be cleaned up rather easily. And what we're actually going to do is a little bit of a trick to get a lot of background lighting, because if you notice here, we're still getting very, very dark shadows, and we want to at least get a little bit of light on there. So what we're going to do is create a polygon sphere and just scale it out. Then in render stats, we can just turn off the primary visibility. Now what this is going to do is it's not going to show up in the render, but what it is going to do, it's going to receive light that's being passed off it from the box and from the one light that we put in the scene and bounce it back all around to give a bit of an overall luminance. So we'll go ahead and do a test render of that now. Okay, we're done. So as you can see, adding that sphere in has just created a little extra luminance in the entire scene, which means that we can probably even dull down the point light that we added in. What you can also notice is that the render time has gone from 15 seconds to 2 minutes and 6 seconds. So this is becoming really, really computationally expensive. And so what I'm actually going to do at this point is close down this window, save my scene, and go back to the cube and actually make the shadows on the lights a little bit easier to render. So we're going to take each of these down to 4. And that should just make everything that much easier to render. So I'm going to save and return to my scene. And this just shows you how powerful it is to use the referencing system, because if you've got multiple objects in a scene, you can update it and it'll affect all the objects. Or if you've got a character that is in multiple scenes, you can update that character, and therefore every single scene that you've got with that character in it will also be updated. Okay, so we've got our basic scene. I'm going to go ahead and tune this down to around 0.3. Come back and frame this shot, and we'll do a render to see what that looks like. Okay, great. So we have just halved our render time by dulling down each of the qualities of the shadows for the boxes, which hasn't made a whole lot of difference to the overall render. Okay, so now we've got the lighting set up to just about how we want it. We can probably tweak it a little later on once we've set up the cameras and the animation, but we're going to start moving on and looking at the dynamics, which is what we're going to use to drive these cubes into an animated sequence. So we're going to come back and look at that in the next tutorial.